It started with a coffee spill. That's what I keep telling myself, that everything went downhill because of one stupid accident. I didn't mean to spill it on his report. It just slipped out of my hand when he startled me. But the way he looked at me that morning, with those cold, narrowed eyes, I knew it wasn't going to be just another bad day at the office. His name was Greg, mid-40s, bald, always chewing gum like it owed him money. He wasn't my boss, but he acted like he owned the place. The kind of guy who corrected your grammar during meetings just to feel superior. I'd only been at the company 6 months, still trying to blend in. When the coffee splashed across his papers, he didn't yell. He just stared long enough to make everyone else in the office go quiet. "You're clumsy," he said finally, voice low. "Maybe this job's too much for you." The whole team laughed. It was humiliating. I cleaned up, apologized, and tried to move on. But Greg didn't. Not that day, not the next, not ever. Over the next week, he started nitpicking everything I did. Wrong font on the presentation, wrong tone in an email, wrong color sticky notes. He even reported me to HR for inappropriate desk organization. I didn't even know that was a thing. At first, I tried to stay calm. I'd been bullied before: school, college, even at my last job, but this felt different. Greg didn't just want to humiliate me. He wanted to break me. The turning point came during a staff meeting. I was presenting a proposal I'd worked on for weeks. My hands were shaking, but I was proud. The numbers lined up perfectly. Halfway through, Greg interrupted. "Where did you get these figures?" "Reddit." The room burst into laughter again. My boss, Mr. Callahan, just sighed. He didn't defend me. No one did. I smiled through it, but when I sat down, I could feel Greg's smirk burning into the back of my neck. That's when I decided I was done being the quiet one. The next day, I came early. I knew Greg liked to leave his desk unlocked when he went for his morning smoke. It wasn't hard to guess his password. His dog's name was literally his desktop wallpaper. I wasn't going to do anything illegal, just find out what kind of person he really was. What I found made my stomach twist. A folder named Notes. Inside, dozens of documents labeled with people's names, mine included. Each one was full of personal observations. Who came late, who flirted, who might get fired soon. Under my name he'd written, "Weak, overly emotional, might quit if pressured more." I sat there staring at those words until I heard footsteps. I barely minimized the window before Greg walked in, cigarette in hand. He looked at me, smirked, and said, "Early today, huh? Trying to impress the boss." I smiled back, hiding the fury bubbling inside me. That was the moment I decided I was going to destroy him. I didn't tell anyone what I'd found. Instead, I printed out a copy of his notes file and slid it into my bag like contraband. Walking past his desk felt like carrying a live grenade, every step measured, every breath shallow. I sat at my desk pretending everything was normal, answered emails, smiled at coworkers, but my brain was on fire with possibilities. If he thought he could write people off like grocery lists, then fine, I'd make sure those lists burned. That afternoon, I started small. Subtle corrections in team documents that made his notes look petty when compared to actual performance. I left a voicemail for HR from an anonymous line detailing his cigarette breaks during client calls and hinting at favoritism. It felt disgusting and powerful at once, the kind of sick satisfaction that comes from finally punching back. But the more I pushed, the more I realized I wanted not just revenge. I wanted him exposed publicly so no one could ever do to someone else what he'd done to me. That night I opened the folder again. There were entries about dating lives, petty judgments about hair and clothes, and worst of all, a file labeled "Weaknesses Leverage." My stomach dropped reading it. He'd been cataloging dirt, not just snark. I photocopied pages, took pictures with my phone. This was bigger than harassment. It was calculated. I felt both vindicated and terrified. I was poking a hornet's nest with a stick. The next morning I did something I'd sworn I'd never stoop to. I baited him. I sent a deliberately provocative Slack message in the #general channel about performance standards, and then watched his reaction like a hawk. He jumped in, publicly shaming someone else's work under the guise of keeping standards high. People murmured. A few typed angry replies. The mask slipped for a second, that smug, self-righteous smile, and I felt that old fear replaced by a cold, clear plan. By noon, HR pinged Lisa, then pinged me. "Can we talk?" the message read. I walked into her office with the printouts hidden under my arm and the folder zipped like a secret. I told her everything. Every nitpick, every comment, every line from his notes. Her face changed from professional neutrality to something sharper. She asked calm, precise questions, then excused herself. 10 minutes later, she returned with Marcus and another HR rep, and for the first time since this started, I saw movement. "We'll investigate," she said. The words felt like oxygen. But that evening, as I packed my laptop, there was a sticky note on my keyboard. In blocky handwriting, "You don't know who you're messing with." No signature. Just the threat, the implied smile. My hands trembled as I peeled it off. I'd wanted to bring him down, but now the consequences were becoming tangible. Someone was watching my desk. Someone was daring me to continue. The investigation began slow and clinical: interviews, timelines, cross-checks. HR asked me to compile a list of incidents. I gave them dates, copies of emails, the printouts. They said they'd put a temporary hold on team assignments while they looked into it. It felt good to be believed, to have someone take notes and nod and record. For the first time, I let myself imagine a normal week where I didn't flinch at every raised voice. Then things escalated in ways I hadn't predicted. Files I'd worked on for weeks vanished from the server, not deleted, but moved into an archive folder labeled Old Versions. My desktop wallpaper changed to a photo of me delivering that very presentation, taken from the audience. Someone had been in my email. Someone had been in my space. HR said they were tightening access logs, but the message was clear. Greg could hurt me quietly, invisibly. That night I stayed late and watched the empty office hum. The fluorescent lights buzzed like bees. I thought about leaving, about finding another job, about how tired I was of being angry. Then my phone buzzed, a calendar invite from Greg with a title. "Quick chat, performance." No location, no message. The little box popped up on my screen like a guillotine. I stared at it until the office blurred. My plan to destroy him had quickly spun into something much more dangerous. A chess game where neither of us knew who had the next move. The calendar invite lingered like a countdown. I could have ignored it, forwarded it to HR, set up a witness. But something stupid and stubborn in me wanted to face him head-on. Maybe I wanted to see the look on his face when the truth landed. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself I hadn't been broken. Either way, I clicked accept and prayed I hadn't just signed my own trap. The chat was scheduled for 3 p.m. in the glass-walled conference room, the one everyone used for quick calls and awkward brainstorming. I sat at the table 5 minutes early, laptop closed, heart thudding so loud I could feel it in my throat. Outside the glass, people walked by, oblivious to what was about to happen. I felt like I was sitting on a stage with no script. Then Greg walked in, slow and deliberate, like a man entering the arena. He smiled that same fake smile, but his eyes were cold, calculating. "You look tense," he said, taking the chair opposite mine as if he owned the chair too. He started with the performance, questions about deadlines, tone, expectations, petty things wrapped in professional language. But every third sentence had a barb, a soft jab designed to make me flinch. I answered, measured, keeping my voice steady. Inside, I was a kettle on the boil. I almost wanted to throw the printouts on the table and watch his face crumble. Almost. Halfway through, he slid a folded sheet across the table. "This came from IT," he said airily. "A log of your recent accesses. Care to explain why you were opening confidential files?" My chest dropped. The sheet had timestamps and file names, stuff I hadn't touched. He was trying to make me look incompetent, to paint me as the employee who'd messed up the system. The room felt suddenly small. The glass walls felt like an audience watching my reputation be dismantled. I didn't yell. I didn't over-explain. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened the secure notes I'd been keeping, and slid the photocopies of his notes across the table. "Care to explain why you have a dossier on the team?" I said quietly. The silence after that sentence was thick, like a blanket someone slapped over the room. His jaw tightened, his fingers drummed, and for the first time he looked genuinely rattled. "Those are observations," he began, voice thin. "For management." He tried to sound reasonable managerial, but Lisa had told me earlier it was enough to get a formal inquiry started. HR was watching. I felt a flicker of relief, the kind you get when a plan starts to actually work. People had stood up before me, now bureaucracy would do the rest. Or so I hoped. Greg's mask slipped for a second, an ugly curl of contempt, and he reached into his jacket like he was going to produce another paper to smear me with. Instead, he slammed his hand on the table and said, "You think this will ruin me? You think you can blackmail me with rumors?" There was an edge of panic under his bluster, panic that told me I'd hit a nerve. He was scrambling. I'd never felt more vindicated and more scared. As we left the room, colleagues made an effort to avoid eye contact. Marcus gave me a tiny, almost invisible nod. Mia mouthed, "Good job." But down the hall, Greg's steps were like thunder. Even from across the office, I could feel the way the air changed when he passed. He wasn't finished. Neither was I. That evening, I found my bike seat slashed in the parking garage. The cut was clean, deliberate. Someone with a sharp blade had taken the time to find my lock and make sure I couldn't ride home. My hands shook holding the torn leather, the smell of rubber and metal harsh in my nose. It was escalation, plain and simple, a message that said I can get to you. The rational part of me called the security desk. The irrational part wanted to stand in the garage and shout until my voice gave out. Security filed a report, took statements, and promised increased patrols. People offered sympathetic glances. A few whispered that maybe I should go to the police, and I almost did. But HR asked me to hold off so their investigation could proceed internally. It felt like being trapped between two systems, corporate process and real-world danger. Neither seemed adequate. That night I went home with a friend's old helmet tucked under my arm, paranoid enough to sleep in jeans and boots. My phone buzzed at midnight. A photo taken from the street from across the building, showing my car tucked in the parking lot, headlights like two eyes. The caption was a single word: "Watch." My blood ran cold. Whoever was behind this wasn't just vindictive. They were methodical, patient, and turning the workplace into a hunting ground. I realized, in a moment that felt both terrifying and liberating, that this had become more than a job fight. It was a war of wills. And wars don't end with apologies. They end when one side is crushed, or when both sides are pulled so low that no one walks away unscathed. The next morning, the office felt different, quieter, heavier. Conversations stopped when I walked by. People glanced at me and then quickly looked away. HR must have started questioning people. Rumors always travel faster than emails. I could almost feel the tension in the air like static. Greg sat at his desk, typing furiously. When he finally looked up, our eyes met. He didn't smirk this time. He didn't even blink. Just that flat, dead stare that said, "You've made this personal." My chest tightened, but I held his gaze for a full 5 seconds before turning back to my screen. I wasn't giving him the satisfaction. By noon, Lisa from HR messaged me. "Greg's been placed on temporary suspension pending review." My whole body exhaled. I wanted to jump up, to celebrate, to breathe again. But then she added, "He didn't take it well." That line sat like a weight in my stomach. Later that day, as I was leaving, the receptionist called out, "Hey, this was left for you." She held up a small interoffice envelope. No return name, no note. Inside was a flash drive. My first thought was HR docs. My second was, "Don't plug it in." I waited until I got home, scanned it through a secure laptop, then opened the only file it contained, a short video. It was me in the office from 2 days ago, filmed through the glass wall of the conference room. The camera zoomed slowly in on my face, as if whoever was filming wanted to capture every flicker of fear. I called HR immediately. Lisa answered groggy. It was after 10 p.m. When I told her what I'd found, she went silent. "We'll handle it," she said finally, but her voice shook. I emailed her the file anyway, along with a photo of the envelope. She told me not to respond to any messages and to come in the next morning for an update. But I didn't sleep. Every sound in my apartment felt amplified: the hum of the fridge, the occasional car outside, my own pulse pounding in my ears. Around 2:30 a.m. my phone buzzed again, an unknown number. The message was short. "You really thought HR could protect you?" My throat went dry. I blocked the number immediately, but the damage was done. I sat by the window until dawn, watching every car that passed, convinced one of them would stop and someone would step out. By morning, I was running on caffeine and adrenaline. I walked into HR like a zombie. Lisa looked pale, sleep-deprived. "We found out who sent it," she said quietly. "The building's security footage caught Greg last night. He came back after hours." I waited for the relief to come, but it didn't, because then she added, "We called the police, but he's gone. Gone, just gone." His keycard had been deactivated hours before, but somehow he'd still gotten in. He'd cleared his desk, wiped his computer, and vanished. No address updates, no contact info, nothing. It was like he'd walked out of his life and dissolved into thin air. For the next week, things calmed down. HR wrapped up their reports, police took statements, and the office tried to pretend everything was normal again. But the tension never really left. Every squeak of the elevator made me look up. Every creak in the hallway made my skin crawl. Then, one night, I stayed late to finish a deadline. Everyone else had gone home. The building was silent except for the low hum of the air conditioning. I leaned back in my chair, eyes burning from the screen. That's when I heard it, faint, rhythmic tapping. At first I thought it was the pipes. Then I realized it was coming from behind me, from Greg's empty cubicle. The tapping was slow, deliberate, like someone drumming their fingers on the desk, waiting. My pulse spiked instantly. I turned around so fast my chair nearly tipped. But Greg's cubicle was exactly as it had been left, stripped bare, drawers open, monitor dark. The only movement came from the faint flicker of a fluorescent bulb overhead. I waited, every sense tuned to the silence. Then, from across the room, I heard it again: tap, tap, tap. I forced myself to stand, moving toward the cubicle like I was walking through a dream. My reflection stretched across the glass divider. My throat was dry enough to crack. I leaned forward, hand trembling, and pulled back the rolling chair. Nothing. Empty. But then I noticed something wedged under the keyboard tray, a small folded piece of paper. I hesitated before opening it, half expecting another threat. Instead, it was typed, not handwritten. "You shouldn't have gone to HR. They can't help you now." My vision blurred. There was no way. HR said he was gone, the police said they were searching. So how the hell was he still in the building? I backed away slowly, scanning the dark office for any movement. The emergency exit signs glowed dim red, and the rest of the floor looked like a graveyard of cubicles. I grabbed my bag, heart hammering, and headed straight for the elevators. I didn't even care that it was only 9:30. I needed out. When I reached the lobby, the security guard, Ken, a quiet older guy, looked up from his desk. "You okay?" he asked, seeing my face. I told him someone had been up there, maybe Greg. He frowned and checked the monitors. Then he paused. "Wait," he muttered. "That's weird." He rewound one of the feeds, the camera showing the floor I'd just come from. The timestamp was from 10 minutes ago. The footage showed me walking between the cubicles, and right behind me, half hidden in the shadows near Greg's desk, a tall figure, just standing there. My stomach twisted. "Pause it," I whispered. The face was blurred, but the outline, the shoulders, the posture, it was unmistakable. Greg. Ken picked up the phone to call the cops. I stood frozen, staring at the monitor. Then, just before the feed cut out, the figure turned directly toward the camera and smiled. The police arrived fast. 2 officers swept the floor, checked the stairwells, even the maintenance closets. Nothing. The cameras had glitched right after the image of Greg appeared. Could be interference, one officer said, but his tone was unconvinced. They promised to review the footage frame by frame, then escorted me to my car just to be safe. Driving home, every streetlight looked like an interrogation lamp. Every shadow between buildings felt alive. I double-checked my mirrors, locked my doors twice, and still couldn't shake the feeling that he was out there, watching. At 3 a.m. my phone buzzed again. No caller ID. My hands trembled as I answered. Static filled the line. Then a whisper, faint, hoarse, almost amused. "You're still working late, huh?" I froze. "Greg," silence. Then a low chuckle. "And finally, check your inbox." The line went dead. I opened my laptop, logged in, and saw one new email. No sender, just a subject line that made my blood run cold. "Final notes about you." I stared at the subject line for a long time before I dared to click it. My palms were slick with sweat. The email opened to reveal a single attached PDF file. Its name: Employee Evaluation Morgan PDF. My name. My breath hitched. The first page looked just like an official company review, HR header, logo, even the right formatting. But as I scrolled, my stomach dropped. The notes weren't about performance anymore. They were personal, invasive. He'd written about where I lived, the time I usually left for work, the names of people I'd met after hours. He even knew what brand of coffee I bought every morning. The tone of it was obsessive, like a hunter cataloging a pattern. By the last page, the sentences started breaking down into fragments. She looks over her shoulder.